Hi guys. As promised, here's a video going over what we learned in class today, as well as an example of the work that you should be doing. This video is about how to tell if two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. If you already took notes in class today, this slide has the same notes that we learned in class. So you do not need to take notes on this slide. If you did not take notes during class, you'll definitely want to write down the information from this slide. We'll start with the definition of parallel lines. The geometry definition of parallel lines are two lines that never cross. This gives us a nice visual, but it doesn't help us with the algebra. The algebra definition of parallel lines are two lines that have the exact same slope. Same signs, same numbers. Everything is the same. So if one line has a slope of 2 over 3, and a second line also has a slope of 2 over 3, we would say those lines are parallel. Here is an example of what parallel lines look like. For the purposes of today's lesson, we will be focusing on the slope, but tomorrow we'll focus on the graph. So it's good to know both. Let's move on to the definition of perpendicular lines. The geometry definition of perpendicular lines is two lines that cross at a 90-degree angle. But again, we're not in geometry class this year. We're in algebra class this year. So we're going to go with the algebra definition, which is two lines who have opposite and reciprocal slopes. Don't forget that opposite and reciprocal are two completely different words. They mean two completely different things. The word opposite means that the signs are different. One of them is positive and the other one is negative. It doesn't matter which one is which. You could have a negative and a positive, or a positive and a negative. The word reciprocal means that the numbers are flipped upside down from each other. So in a similar example to our parallel lines, if one line has a slope of positive 2 over 3, a perpendicular line should have a slope of negative 3 over 2. Positive and negative, and then flipped. Here's a visual of what perpendicular lines look like. So two lines that cross at a 90-degree angle. Now, these are two very specific scenarios regarding the relationship between two lines. Most lines are not parallel and not perpendicular either. Most lines are just two intersecting lines, which we're going to call neither. So if you have two lines that are intersecting, but they don't intersect at a 90-degree angle, then they are neither. To tell if two lines are neither, you just decide that they're not parallel and they're not perpendicular. So there's no special fancy way to figure that out. It's just if you said they're not parallel and you also said they're not perpendicular, then they're neither. It could be that they have part of the perpendicular, but not all of it. So maybe you have 2/3 and 3 over 2, but they're both positive. Then those would not be perpendicular and you would say neither. Or maybe you have positive 2/3 and negative 2/3. So they're opposites, but not reciprocals. Those would be neither. Or they could just have like completely different slopes. So one of them could be 5 and the other one could be 1/2. And they have absolutely nothing in common, and those would be neither. Here's a picture of what neither lines look like. So again, they do cross. They just don't cross at a 90-degree angle. Now, for your homework tonight and for the activity that we were working on in class today, that I do want you to try to finish before Friday's lesson, in-class lesson, you're given two lines, and then you need to compare their slopes to decide if they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And so I want to practice with two that are in standard form, because these types of problems will require work from you. So here's an example, and the question says to say if it is parallel, perpendicular, or neither, and I've given you two lines. And so what we need to do is we need to change each of these lines into slope-intercept form so that we can state what the slope is. I'm going to start with the equation on the left, 2x plus y equals -4. And to get that into slope-intercept form, I'm going to minus the 2x on each side. And this equation is now in slope-intercept form. My letter y is all by itself. Everything else is on the other side. And so I would say I'm done changing this equation. Let's change the second equation. So similar to the first equation, I'm going to start by minusing my x to the other side. Make sure when you carry down the 2y that you also carry down the minus sign with it. That minus sign is attached to the number 2, so it makes it a -2. My second step is going to be to divide everything by that -2 that's in front of the y. We talked about this in yesterday's video. When you have a negative divided by a negative, it will turn into a positive. So you want to cancel out these two negative signs and make them a positive. And also, this divided by 2 does have to stay on the bottom of the fraction. So you can put a 1 next to your letter x, and then that's going to be the fraction positive 1/2. And then 10 divided by -2 is -5. Once you have both of your equations in slope-intercept form, you're going to take the number in front of the x because that's your slope. And so for my first equation, my slope is -2/1. And for my second equation, my slope is positive 1/2. Once you've decided what your slopes are, you should have a little internal monologue in your head that first asks, are my slopes the exact same number? If you say yes, then the answer is parallel. If you say no, then you should move on to a new question. Now, in this problem, my slopes are not the exact same number, so I'm going to say no, these are not parallel. So then the next thing I check for is perpendicular. So in my head, I ask myself, do they have the opposite signs and are they flipped upside down from each other? And it has to be both of those things. So yes, they have opposite signs. This one is negative, that one is positive. And yes, they are flipped upside down from each other. This is a 2/1 and this is a 1/2. So it helps to write your whole numbers as fractions so that you can definitely tell if they're reciprocals. If you say yes, they have opposite signs and they're flipped upside down, then your final answer is that these lines are perpendicular. If you say no to that one as well, then you would choose the final option, which is neither. Okay. So I do expect to see work on your homework. Any equation that's not in slope-intercept form, I should see that you changed it into slope-intercept form. Your final answer on your homework is a word. It's the word parallel or perpendicular or neither. Also, on your Delta Math tonight, your Delta Math is set up so that if you are just randomly guessing and you're not actually doing the problems and you get something wrong, it's going to start taking points off of your Delta Math. So make sure that you're not just randomly guessing and pushing buttons. Make sure that you're actually doing the work on a piece of scratch paper or on your whiteboard before deciding what your final answer is. This concludes today's video.